Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions. If you like the show, we would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Joining me today, we have, as always, Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cam?
Hey, what's going on, everybody?
What's going on? And making his return to the show, Logan Wilkinson. How you doing, Logan?
Newly married.
Newly married, yes. First time since the wedding for Logan. Mm-hmm. We're going to be talking all about Rookie of the Year today as we continue our 90s month. Is there any reason you jumped on for this one in particular, Logan, or was it just like, hey, the timing's working out, so let's hop on and talk about baseball stuff?
Well, I really like Rookie of the Year a lot, actually, as a kid. And we'll get into it later, but there is, as usual, a really great Roger Ebert quote about this movie that I actually think captures a lot of just like kind of the childlike magic of this movie. And it hit, at a perfect time in my life when this would have been on reruns all the time. And so I really love the movie.
Sure. Great. We're talking about Rookie of the Year today because we are continuing our 90s month here. We're peek behind the curtain, recording this about a week ahead of when it's actually going to go out. But thus far, we've done Camp Nowhere, we've done Heavyweights, we got a couple more 90s movies in the hopper because it's a fun 5 Friday month here in August. So we're going to get to dive into all sorts of stuff. But this one was originally released July 9th, 1993. Other releases of the time. This is definitely a summer that we've focused on at some other point here on the show because I had a immediately like flash memory of pulling all of these releases before.
It's a great year.
A great year with some questionable items, including the first one out May 28th of this year gave us the Super Mario Brothers movie. But a couple weeks later, June 11th, we had Jurassic Park, of course, an all-timer.
Masterpiece, yeah.
The Last Action Hero the following week, June 18th. Doubleheader of Dennis the Menace and Sleepless in Seattle on June 25th.
Both are great. Both are great.
The Firm and Son-in-Law on July 2nd.
One is great.
If you're looking for some Pauly Shore-ness. Here on July 9th, we had Rookie of the Year alongside Weekend at Bernie's 2.
Again, one is good.
Concept that you didn't think would have made it for a second film. The week after this, we had Free Willy and Hocus Pocus. And Hocus Pocus, probably the last time we probably really talked about this month was when we did the Hocus Pocus D Plus show. That was July 16th. The week later here this summer, we had Coneheads, July 23rd. Robin Hood Men in Tights, July 28th.
Very good.
So I Married an Axe Murderer, July 30th. You want to talk about like cult hits that I remember being always on television. I remember
Comedy Central.
So I Married an Axe Murderer always being on Comedy Central. Yeah,
love that.
We were talking before we started. Tommy Lee Jones, The Fugitive, was August 6th, where he does play a marshal,
U.S. Marshal.
And then I stretched out the time frame that I was looking at just because I saw Surf Ninjas there on August 20th and was like, I got to include Surf Ninjas.
Hells to the yeah.
Never even seen that movie. Don't know what that is.
Dude.
So I immediately always got Surf Ninjas and The Three Ninjas confused and
Three
would like
Ninjas
mix
is
those
great.
two up.
Two separate things.
Very different things.
Two very different movies.
Surf Ninjas is like Rob Schneider, Leslie Nielsen, and they're ninjas who surf.
They do a phenomenal rendition of Bob Aran.
Yeah.
To a Fight. It's fantastic. Crazy dumb movie. It's awesome. Three Ninjas.
What is Three Ninjas on? Is that a Disney thing?
I don't think so.
No.
I think I've looked for Three Ninjas before, but I don't.
I'd watch every one of his movies, including them with Hulk Hogan at the theme park in a heartbeat if that was on Disney Plus.
Box office breakdown, as we often do when we look at some of these films. I've pulled together the gross of the movie. We're back in like the 90s era, so the numbers haven't been as robust as they are on more of the modern films, but I did go to thenumbers.com, and the last couple movies we had were in like the 10 to $20 million range for Camp Nowhere and Heavyweights. The box office gross for Rookie of the Year, $53.5 million in 1993.
Absolutely.
And adjusted approximated $139.5 million adjusted for inflation now.
That ain't nothing to sneeze at.
So to give you a little bit of context, Logan, Camp Nowhere, when we did that, was $10.4 million in 1994, and it was 111th in the top films of the year gross. And then last week's Heavyweights in 1995, $17.6 million, was 97. So where do you guys think, with $53.5 million, where do you think Rookie of the Year falls?
I like that we're still doing this game, even for movies like Rookie of the Year. I think...
I'm very appreciative that like some of these charts go to number 100 and beyond.
I think it is going to be... That's a really good amount.
Sorry, before you make your guesses, I will give you the barometer to start off with. Jurassic Park, the number one movie of this year, was $338.7 million.
Domestic.
So with a $53.5 million, where do you think this one falls?
Thing is, keep in mind, 93, there's no Star Wars movie, there's no James Bond movie. Superhero movies don't exist, really. So none of those usual suspects.
I'm going to say 72.
No, I think it's way higher than that. I think it's way higher. I think it's top 25. I'm going to say Rookie of the Year is 21st.
All right. So number 72 for Cameron was Nowhere to Run with 22.1 million. So yeah,
Gotcha.
we're way better than 72 this time around. And just because I was already going to call this out anyway, but I'll throw it out right here for you, Logan. 1993 also gave us the Much Ado About Nothing that we've done, that we've talked about on That Nerdy Site Show.
My favorite romantic comedy of all time.
This was number 71.
Nice.
Just ahead of Nowhere to Run there with 22.5 million. And you said what, Logan? You said
21st.
21st? Number 21 was Dennis the Menace, which I mentioned in the initial bit there, at 51.2 million. So you're close, but we did a little bit better than Dennis the Menace at number 21.
Okay, wow, there's a big gap
Top
between
20.
the first and the 25th. I thought we were going to be more spread out. After being so wrong about Heavyweights and Camp Nowhere, was anticipating...
What did you think Heavyweights did?
Oh, initially, much better than it ended up being.
No.
I would say... Oh, go ahead, Logan. You were closer to it, so you can make a guess.
Probably like 18th then. It's close. It's only like a $3 or $4 million difference here, so...
Mm-hmm. I'm going to go ahead and pull a
Price is Right.
Price is Right on you and say 17.
17. You pulled it the wrong way. It's 19 is Rookie of the Year. So Logan takes this one. Number 18 was Scent of a Woman, 55.1 million. Number 17 was The Crying Game, 57.1 million.
Oh, wow.
Number 16, another That D Plus Show alumni, Cool Runnings. Was number 16
1993 is a crazy year for movies. That's so stacked. Wow.
Behind Dennis the Menace, number 22 was Demolition Man.
Hell's yeah.
Yeah.
Last Action Hero was number 24.
Yeah.
The Nightmare Before Christmas was number 25.
Yeah.
If we jump up to higher era, we get, I'll throw this one out there for you, Logan, as the political and presidential kind of character. Dave was number 14, about Kevin Kline as the president. Number 13, A Few Good Men. Number 12, Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
Number 11, The Pelican Brief.
Goddamn.
And getting into the top 10, at the number 10 with $77.6 million, Free Willy.
A movie that could not be made today.
Yeah, we talked about it. Like, it could be made today in it'd be a CGI whale or something like that. But
Why would you go see that movie then? Like, the whole point
yeah,
of Free Willy was to see a real whale do that shit.
Yeah, the thing we were talking about the other day was like, you wouldn't make Free Willy today now because it's a double A movie in a superheroes are the only thing that thrive kind of landscape. Number 9 was Cliffhanger. Number 8
Yes.
was the 1993 sales of Aladdin, which had come out in November of '92. But
That makes sense.
It still sold well enough that
Wow,
it made $93 million in 1993.
For
Number 7, In the Line of Fire. Number 6,
Oh,
Indecent
yeah.
Proposal. Number 5, spoilers for a couple weeks from now when we do Mrs. Doubtfire, was Mrs. Doubtfire. Number 4, Sleepless in Seattle. Number 3, The Firm. Number 2, The Fugitive. And number 1, Jurassic Park. And yeah,
Shout out to-
of these, it's such a weird eclectic thing because Jurassic Park, $338 million, easily the faraway runaway success.
Yeah. It was the highest movie of all time when it came out. Yeah.
Yeah,
so-
number 2, The Fugitive, $183 million. So $150 million difference between the number 1 and number 2 movies that year.
Well, also just
yeah,
the fact that, God, I mean, not to put on my curmudgeon hat here, but the fact that the third highest grossing movie of the year could be something like The Firm is just such a, I think, testament to the quality of the film industry in 1983 versus the quality of the film industry in 2023, 2024. And maybe one was a healthier environment than...
you say that, but I feel like Oppenheimer was number 2 last year.
Sure, but Oppenheimer, I would argue, is a
is
weird
absolutely
anomaly.
the anomaly. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just it's funny to draw that comparison on the heels of Barbenheimer being a thing.
I think also the fact of the matter is, like, you had so many more studios with interconnections to, major distributors. Like, Disney for years had like 12, 15 different like production companies that they distribute for. And you don't really have distributors anymore. Like, that's the thing today, that we don't have distributors. We just have the corporate owners of these like lines, and they're brands now. They're not so they're not even being independent in their decision making. So you really just can't make these AA films anymore because, one, like, people just aren't going out to see them, and two, they're like, the people who make good quality AA films aren't there anymore.
Yeah, this is like Buena Vista, right, that Disney had for a number of years. But I mean, you touched on this earlier, Cameron, but you kind of repeated it there again, which is the fact that in a lot of ways, AA movies just don't exist, right? Like, they just don't exist anymore. And I would go as far as to maybe quibble with the notion that people don't come out to see them. I just think they don't exist anymore. I think accountants looked at it and just said, these are not making as much money as we want to invest in them, right? Because whenever you see one of those big kind of what is essentially a AA movie come out, I feel like they can do pretty well nowadays. They're just not.
They're not
investing
making
in them.
billions at the box office, so people
Because
don't want to put their
and people don't give them the
resources
time to grow, right? Because what is John Wick? The first John Wick is the definition of like kind of a B movie, action movie, AA kind of thing, but it was allowed to grow and build by word of mouth like AA movies did back then, and it turned into the the behemoth that John Wick became. Or even Fast and Furious. That's a AA knockoff of Point Break, and look what it became, right?
Yeah.
But that came from a different era.
A part of the issue also is that you have like the bean counters have basically said it's worth the investment to spend hundreds of millions of dollars, even if it's a bomb, because the potential payoff of $1 billion franchise is like makes sense to them. And that's just absolutely like harmed the industry because everybody wants to be the next, next Feige. Everyone wants to be the next, like, the big person who is like heading this like massive franchise, right?
And this is before you get into like the tax write-off of just having movies just straight up not even come out because you get the write-off for it, right?
Yeah. I don't recall who it was. I think it was the winner of short film at the Academy Awards last year, but one of the people basically in their acceptance speech was like, hey, it'd be great if instead of making a $100 million movie, you made $25 million movies. Like, let's see what that creative output looks
Right.
like.
Yeah.
And I remember that being like a rallying cry for a lot of like smaller indie artists and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
Because I
unfortunately,
think
unlikely to see that from your Disneys and your Warner Brothers and whatnot. You'll see it from
Because
like
I-
Neon and like
Yeah.
Annapurna Studios and stuff like that. But they're going to be even limited themselves. So
Yeah. But you also
I
have
think-
like, oh, go ahead, Logan. Sorry.
I'm just gonna say I think it's also important while doing a '90s movie month to talk about the fact that the '90s were the '90s to early 2000s, right, which is the era that we all collectively grew up in, was such an interesting, weird era of movies in a lot of ways. That were sort of in between eras, right? Like the new Hollywood era had ended. And you weren't really into like the full-fledged like blockbuster thing yet. In some ways, Jurassic Park is sort of the gunshot for that, right? And so you get this really kind of, I think, flowering of weird AA movies, and Pauly Shore is a movie star for a couple of years here, and
he has been in a lot of these like summer,
Yeah.
like son-in-law in the army now,
and
biodomes
in the
around
Army
here
now.
somewhere.
Yeah, and so I just think, a lot of these movies in the 90s aren't what some might call good, but I don't know. I think I appreciate them for their creativity and at least going for it a lot more than when I look at, a lot of the movies that have been put out in 2023, 2022, 2024, right? And it feels more samey. And this is before we even get into like the level of like films looked different than, and usually better than films look now in a lot of ways, because of how they've sort of copied how the MCU looks. But that isn't the MCU looks nice, but not necessarily pretty, if that makes sense. A lot of these movies have aged in a better way, going from like the 90s to the early 2000s, both on like a film grain quality and cinematography, but also just like these are fun movies, and they're not necessarily trying to be anything bigger than that, and that allows them, I think, to tell these really compelling self-contained stories, right? Because we're obviously a few years away from it where we are with Rookie of the Year, but like the Matrix, the first Matrix, is really cool, not because it's the start of a 4-film series that spans 25 years, but because it's really cool. It's a really great crafted story that has so many layers and has so much depth to it, right? And they didn't think they were going to get another one. In fact, the odds that they were very high. It was very unlikely they would get another Matrix movie. And I don't know. I think not having almost the safety net of this being a franchise can sort of allow you to take more creative risks that can make your story more compelling, right?
A little correction. Oppenheimer was number 3 last year. So Mirror's the firm. I had forgotten that Super Mario Brothers movie kind of came in between
Oh,
Barbie and
right.
Oppenheimer last year, in the top worldwide box office stuff.
I think another part of the like massive distinction between our current era period and back then is also just in the, we also are dealing with the fact like two things. One, post-launch distribution on streaming is my movie going directly as a Netflix movie,
Yeah.
or is it going to be like who picked up what project? Is it going to be on Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, like all these things? And then you also have the fact like the erasure of the home video market.
Yeah, everything
That's a
going to
huge one.
streaming, and now
Yeah.
now everybody having their own streaming. Like for a while there, it was okay. Yeah, everything's going to Netflix, but when it became okay, Disney is launching their own thing, Paramount Plus, Peacock. Like when
Hulu,
everybody has their
right.
own streaming service, everybody's sacrificing the box office and the theatrical market, and especially during COVID, everybody kind of was like, all right, we're going to just put this straight onto the streaming service after 6 weeks. And it's like, okay, well, then you've just cannibalized your box office revenue in favor of like faux numbers that you can try and sell your shareholders, but really are like, is like all of the Glass Onion, like
Yeah.
how much did that really
Great.
move the needle in terms of
Right.
Netflix subscriptions? We'll never know, and they'll never tell, because if it was a good number, they would have touted it.
Yeah.
But yeah. I think we definitely see just the way the industry has changed so drastically. But then we do still get like big spectacle things, and there's the occasion, like last summer in particular was a dead summer until Barbenheimer happened,
Barbenheimer.
Yeah.
and that was like the breath of fresh air. But like Indiana Jones was a huge bomb, Mission Impossible was a
Yeah.
huge bomb, like Little Mermaid probably made like broke even, but The Flash, like so many movies last year lost hundreds of millions of dollars because people were like, I'll just see it on streaming in 6 weeks. I don't need to go out to the theaters to catch this. But this year we have like a little bounce back, and like Elemental's making $1 billion, or not Elemental, Inside Out 2 is making $1 billion. Deadpool and Wolverine's on track to make $1 billion. Like when the market shows up, like Twisters even did
Anything
far
but you,
outperformed
right, at the end of
domestically.
last year,
It's not
this
doing
year.
anything overseas, but like it blew people away in terms of like what the tracking was saying it was going to do, because the tracking tends to focus on like New York and LA markets, and Twisters, much like Twister back in the mid 90s, really sold to rural America. And so like the markets like Phoenix and Oklahoma and whatnot showed up for that one in a way that like the pundits weren't expecting. So
Yeah.
there's
also think-
opportunity out there, but it's certainly fewer and far between.
Yeah, and I think to your point too, by everyone having kind of the proliferation of all streaming services, you also sort of lose, I think, the universal experience of going to the movie store.
That's
right?
that's what I
And
was saying though, yeah, because it used to be
finding
you just had
something,
one
right?
store, or you had a couple stores. Depends on what you wanted your membership to be and like what kind of they catered to.
Right, but that was it, and everyone would go there together. And if you were like, "Hey, I saw this movie, go check it out," your friend could go to that exact same store and probably rent the exact same VHS tape that you had or DVD that you had, right? And it was really easy for word of mouth to spread on a movie after it had come to video. Versus now, if I say, "Hey, I saw this movie on Netflix or on Peacock or Prime or Hulu or Paramount Plus," they might not have that streaming service because there are so many. It is just cable now, and so you're in this
We
situation.
don't have Netflix here. Like neither
Right,
Trevor or I
and
have
so-
an active Netflix.
And so it's that situation of this is the problem, right?
Yeah.
It becomes way harder to find, and then that stunts its growth to really expand the way it wants to. And this is before we even get into movies having these truncated releases. And this is all stuff that's just compounded, right? Like the reasons the film industry is not doing as well as it could are not really that complex. They're pretty straightforward. There's just not necessarily easy ways to back out of the decisions and investments that have been poured into these things, right?
Yeah.
Companies spend lots of money on streaming. It's hard to then back out and say, "Oh, that was a mistake. That didn't go like we wanted it to," right?
It's also time wise. Like you can't take back 10 years of infrastructure and
Right.
deals and like movie culture that you've developed over the last decade.
It gets
like you
and
can't
it gets
take
messy,
it back.
right? And more to the point, the solutions are the answers to the problems are are longer term ones. And so if you're the CEO or CFO or CEO or COO of a company, are you worried about making sure everything is great 10 years from now or 7 years from now or even 5 years from now? Or you're making sure everything is great for the next quarterly call or the next year's financial report? And that's the problem, is that you have to take some lumps before you get to the good stuff, but you might not even last that long if you do, right? And
I mean,
so-
Paramount just got bought out by a venture capital
Yeah.
firm.
Yeah.
Like Paramount is no longer owned by the family that founded Paramount anymore.
and
It's
this
gone. And the reason
This is the
why?
problem.
Because they invested in Paramount Plus and it didn't do well.
Yeah.
Everybody chased the golden goose of streaming without realizing that even Netflix barely makes a profit,
It was more
and
of
it
a
took them
siren
forever
call.
to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah.
it's just hey, here's what we're selling our shareholders. Yeah, we're going to eat a loss for a while. Like I keep seeing the tweet pop up of like, oh, Warner Brothers Discovery realized it was misvaluing things, and it had overestimated the value of its assets by like $9.1 billion. So actually, they lost $10 billion last quarter. And it's like, how do you fuck that up that much? Yeah. Anyway, good fun tangent into just the state of the industry compared to the 90s of our youth. But back to Rookie of the Year here. The film has a runtime of 1 hour and 43 minutes. It was a 20th Century Fox film, but because of the conglomeration of all these corporations, that obviously now falls under the Disney banner. Other movies in the 20th Century Fox timeline around here, we had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 was March of 93. We had The Sandlot, which we've talked about on that D Plus show before, was April of that year. Hot Shots Part 2 was May. Then we had Rookie of the Year here in July. Robin Hood Men in Tights a few weeks later. The Good Son was going to be 1993, or September of 93. The Beverly Hillbillies movie was October, and Mrs. Doubtfire in November of 93. So, even there, a banner year for 20th Century Fox.
Dude,
But,
The Good Son is such a
look at
messed
that.
up movie. Holy crap.
Oh, sure, yeah. Look at that 20 years later, 25 years later, 30 years later. And our roll call, our who's who of the film, our director here, Daniel Stern, who, of course, known from his work on The Wonder Years, where he directed 10 episodes of the Wonder Years, in addition to being the narrator of that series. Of course, probably best known as Marv on Home Alone, but from a directing standpoint, yeah, he directed 10 episodes of The Wonder Years, and Rookie of the Year is the only film he ever directed. He went back years later, would do the occasional TV episode, but Rookie of the Year, his only real film direction. The writer here was Sam Harper, who Rookie of the Year, his debut film. After that, he went on and wrote the films Just Married and the Cheaper by the Dozen and Cheaper by the Dozen 2 films with Steve Martin, I think, right? Yeah. And then he would also write the animated film Rio. And our cast of characters here, Thomas Ian Nicholas as Henry Rowan-Gartner. Rookie of the Year, well, not his first credit, was like his first big breakout movie. After this, he would go on and be in A Kid in King Arthur's Court a couple years later, which I remember, and then I did not remember, or I had blocked it away. But he also did that same character in a like straight to VHS sequel, A Kid in Aladdin's Palace, which I imagine would be a very interesting watch today. Then, of course, also probably best known for his work across the American Pie series. Gary Busey here as Chet Stedman, going back to his work in stuff like the Buddy Holly story, Lethal Weapon, Point Break, Under Siege, Rookie of the Year here. After this, he was in Grand Theft Auto Vice City, which I'll call out here, knowing Logan is a huge fan of that one. Alongside, I think he also plays the same character in like the Vice City stories and ancillary stuff. He was in, of course, The Apprentice with former President Shitface, and most recently, you could see him pop up occasionally in the Hitman games in the World of Assassination trilogy, where he would be like the occasional elusive target that was like only there for a week, and if you messed up the mission, it was gone, and you only got one shot at trying to take him out. But yeah, he popped up there as himself, kind of thing, doing a full Gary Busey. So shout out to that. Albert Hall here playing the general manager Martinella, having been in stuff like Apocalypse Now, Malcolm X, Rookie of the Year here. After Rookie of the Year, he was in the films Major Payne and National Treasure Book of Secrets, which we've talked about on that D Plus show. Amy Morton as Henry's mom, Mary Rowan-Gartner, was in Rookie of the Year and 8mm and Up in the Air. And these days, she is probably best known for her work on Chicago PD, which she's been on for many, many years, alongside crossovers into the extended Chicago cinematic universe of Chicago Justice, Chicago Med, and Chicago Fire. And she's like, she's one of the regulars on that. 220 some odd episodes, I think. It is she's been doing that. And it's when I see that kind of stuff, I'm like, oh, that's right. There is an entire side of TV space that I never think about or have no connection to, no knowledge of.
Sometimes it comes up on my TikTok page, and I'm just like, this is massive and
Yeah.
interconnected.
Yeah. Dan Hedaya as Larry Fisher. One of those classic character actors that you see from everything, including stuff like Commando, The Usual Suspects, probably notable to a lot of people our age as the dad from Clueless. He's also, I remember him distinctly as Richard Nixon in the film Dick.
Yep.
With Kirsten Dunst.
Yeah.
And then after that, he was in Mulholland Drive and continues to work being one of those that guy kind of actors. Bruce Altman, another one of them, as Jack Bradfield here, having been in stuff like Regarding Henry, Glengarry Glen Ross, Rookie of the Year, The Paper, and Matchstick Men, among many other credits. Eddie Bracken as Bob Carson, the owner, with a career dating back to 1939, but has been previously seen on That D Plus show as the toy store owner, Mr. Duncan, in Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, right around the same time. Kind of an end of career resurgence for him. Robert Hy Gorman plays Clark, and had been in Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, Leprechaun, Forever Young, Mr. Nanny, and Rookie of the Year. He was very much that kid brother in this era of shows or movies. Patrick LeBrec as George, the glue tying our 90s movies together thus far. In addition to having been in Beethoven, he's here in Rookie of the Year as George. We talked about him a couple weeks ago in Camp Nowhere as, or we didn't talk about him in Camp Nowhere. We didn't like put the connection together until Heavyweights, but in Camp Nowhere, he was the store clerk that tries to card one of our protagonists. And then in Heavyweights, he's the like turncoat turned ally camp counselor person who was like, I was a former chipmunk. Here's where they stash all the cash or all their stuff, and then basically makes a racket by reselling all the candy back to them. So shout out to him, kind of being the like connective tissue among our three movies thus far.
So far,
month. And unfortunately, that is where it ends. He's not going to appear in any of the other things we have lined up. Daniel Stern as Brickma here. Of course, as I said before, having been in The Wonder Years, the Home Alone films, City Slickers, Bushwhacked, Dilbert, and most recently he's been in the Apple Plus series, For All Mankind, popping up there. I think one of the trivia things I have is basically like he specifically worked with the writer to put his character in as many situations where his character's just trapped off screen so that he wouldn't have to direct himself and could just focus on being the director. Colum Jacobson Durstein as Becky, Henry's little crush, makes her debut here in Rookie of the Year, but she's also been seen in that D Plus show because she'll return as Kat in D2 The Mighty Ducks and D3 The Mighty Ducks, before also being in Men in Black 2. And then, this is a fun little bit of trivia I found, she kind of moved away from the acting scene, has become a chef in her later years here, but she popped up as an uncredited cameo in Jon Favreau's Chef.
There you go.
Film a number of years back. So shout out to her, living her chef dreams. I wonder if she'll pop up in The Bear season 4 maybe. Andy Berman as Ernie, having also been in stuff like The Wonder Years, Rookie of the Year here, has a lot of miscellaneous credits, but really went on and kind of made his career as a writer and producer on Psych, including being a co-writer for 2020's Psych 2, Lassie Come Home, the little Psych movie. So shout out to him kind of having that like post-acting career. And then John Candy, of course, here as Cliff Murdoch, the announcer, in a notably uncredited role, which we'll talk about here a little bit in the trivia. Of course, from stuff like SCTV, The Blues Brothers, Spaceballs, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, Uncle Buck, Home Alone, Rescuers Down Under, a weird movie that I, like, when I see pop up, think like, oh my God, that is a thing that I watched a lot, and I don't know why, because I hated it, but it was like one of those weird grotesque watches. Nothing But Trouble with Dan Aykroyd, movie of this era. Rookie of the Year here, and also Cool Runnings, which we've done on that D Plus show. I have three people here credited as the three big whiffers, which all get strikeouts from Henry, including Barry Bonds, Bobby Bonilla, or Bobby Bonilla, and Pedro Guerrero, who I imagine, I know Barry Bonds was a actual player. Yeah. I imagine all of them, and I imagine there are many other actual baseball players featured in the film, but I couldn't pinpoint them.
I'm going to give you a Logan-sponsored bonus fun trivia fact, because it's my single favorite piece of sports trivia that every single July 1st, I believe it's July 1st, ESPN will celebrate Bobby Bonilla Day, because Bobby Bonilla is an actual baseball player who played for the New York Mets, among other teams. And every single year on July 1st,
Bobby Bonilla he's the one who has like the crazy contract buyout stuff and makes millions of dollars every year and will for the next 30 years or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Basically, he gets paid every year to not play baseball by the New York Mets for, I think, until like 2030 or 2040 something. Mm-hmm. It is my single favorite day in the entire sports year. Not the World Series, not Super Bowl, not the World Cup. It's this day on July 1st, because ESPN will do like 5 hours just ripping the Mets for making the worst contract in the history of American sports. It's so fucking funny to me. I love it every day. It makes me laugh. It makes me smile. So shout out to Bobby Bonilla for still getting the bag now more than 20 years after he retired. Still getting paid by the Mets to not play baseball. We love to see it.
This is a thing I literally learned probably in the last month. Maybe from like residual posts celebrating Bobby Bonilla Day. Because that's like I saw that.
I think I talked about it at the wedding to some of my groomsmen. You might have heard it from me as well. But I talk about it often around the July time period.
A couple other little fun cameo pop-ups that we see here. Not even cameos, but just like before they were big kind of roles. We have Neil Flynn as the Cubs first baseman Oki, who, of course, right around this time, also notably in The Fugitive, but would go on to be best known as the janitor from Scrubs, as well as being the lead of The Middle, the sitcom that he was on for many, many years. And W. Earl Brown is the catcher in here. When Rowan Gardner first goes out, he's the catcher that basically hands him the ball. And of course, he would go on to be very fascinated and obsessed with the baseball in There's Something About Mary. He was also in Deadwood. And for all of us, he is Bill in The Last of Us, the game. So fun seeing like a early W. Earl Brown pop up here.
Give us a third shout out to someone who does much more later on, which is to Ian Gomez, who is the bellboy during one of the hotel sequences.
He's the weird bellboy, yeah. I saw him, I recognized him. I didn't pop him in here in the credits.
Who will go on to star as Andy in Cougar Town.
Yeah.
One of my favorite shows of all time by Bill Lawrence, who also did Scrubs. And is, of course, me and Travia's summer rewatch. Every summer we rewatch Cougar Town because it is the perfect summer breezy light show. So I will give a shout out to Ian Gomez as well.
I did see that when I was doing the thing. I forgot to put it there in the doc.
Cougar Town is so much fun. Such a light. He's great as Andy in Cougar
Ian
Town.
Gomez credited as Odd Bellman.
Perfect. Exactly perfect.
Yeah. He popped up and I know this guy becomes like one of those people kind of thing. And so I looked him up and I was like, what has he done? And the biggest thing in his repertoire, like he was a handful of Drew Carey episodes. But his real big thing there was Cougar Town for
over 100 episodes.
For many, many years. Yep. Some trivia for you. According to a TikTok clip that made the rounds a little while back, people have done the math for Henry's pitch from the stands and calculated out that throwing the movie says 430-yard pitch, but I think they calculated it out as like 420-ish yards. Going straight to home plate means that his throw would have had to have been roughly 150 miles per hour to stay straight up and not and drop the proper amount there.
Pretty solid.
John Candy, as the radio broadcaster, is uncredited. His role isn't mentioned in the credits because he wasn't originally cast in the movie. There were a lot of, I didn't pull them all together, but there were a lot of casting things that were, hey, we brought Daniel Stern in. you think he could get Joe Pesci? We want Joe Pesci to play Chet Stedman. And Daniel Stern was like, no, I don't want him to do that. Macaulay Culkin, they originally wanted to be Henry, but Macaulay Culkin's father, maybe infamously, wanted him to be in The Good Son, and so that's where he ended up going and doing later in the year. So yeah, it was like there was a lot of like, oh, we got Daniel Stern, maybe he can like bring in the successful like
The
other
Home Alone
elements of
crew,
Home Alone
right,
too,
yeah.
and we can kind of bank on that. And he was very much like, I don't want to confuse audiences. I don't want to cash in on that. I want this to be a movie that stands kind of on its own. So shout out to that.
Also, Joe Pesci would not have been as good as Gary Busey in that role.
He would have been a wild, like, no, Joe Pesci can be a lot of things. He cannot be the pitcher of the Cubs.
No.
Like that would be a wild.
I don't know. I don't know how you
call.
convince the audiences that a 5'4",
Like, if I was going to cast anybody, or Joe Pesci as anybody in this role, it would have been the sleazy fish character,
Absolutely,
the
yeah.
like wannabe next owner kind of thing,
Or
Yeah.
the manager. I feel like he could have been.
or
fun
the
as the manager.
the mom's boyfriend who turns into the sleazy manager immediately. When Henry takes his first at bat, shout out to me recognizing that that's what the AB here is abbreviating in the
You did
IMDb
great.
trivia bit. When Henry takes his first at bat against the LA Dodgers, pitcher in the scene, Trigger is Tim Stoddard. Stoddard was a technical advisor for the baseball scenes of the film, and coincidentally, he was actually a pitcher for the Cubs in real life, pitching for the '84 Cubs that won the or National League East title. Haha, I got NL too, yay! National League East title, and eventually lost to the San Diego Padres in the NLCS National League Conference semifinals. Is that
yeah,
Championship series.
Championship
You were
series, yeah.
close.
Okay.
close,
You're
very close.
okay? Whatever. When Henry's mother, Amy Morton, is celebrating Henry scoring a run after being walked, she hits her head on the lamp hanging above her head around 57 minutes into the movie. Morton obviously didn't mean to do this, and she's visibly hurt, and after sitting down mutters, "Oh shit," which you can see if you read lips, but it has been dubbed out in the audio. So yeah, I saw that and I was like, that was a fun little goof, but shout out for them leaving it in. Except for once, Martinella gets Henry's last name wrong. He calls him the following: Rulingfurter, Gardenhoser, Ravi Boozer, Rosenbagger, Runamucker, Rowan Gartner, Rulengruder, and Rosenberger.
This is a sneak peek to later on in the episode. My single favorite part of the entire movie is the manager getting his name wrong every single
That
time.
running gag. Yeah.
I love it.
Following the film's release, Tom and Ian Nicholas threw out the first pitch at multiple Cubs games and was also invited to sing Take Me Out to the Ball Game many, many times during the customary seventh-inning stretch at Wrigley Field. During the 2015 National League Championship Series, oh, that's where I would have seen NLCS.
Yep.
It's actually written out here, where the Cubs faced the Mets as they did in the movie. He attended Game 4 in a Rowan Gartner #1 jersey, similar to what he wore during the film. Unfortunately, the Cubs end up losing 8-3, knocking them out of the postseason.
You're
in that game.
goddamn right.
But 23 years after the film's release, the Chicago Cubs would go on to win the 2016 World Series in 7 games against the Cleveland Indians, coming back from a notorious 3-1 series deficit to win the series 4-3, including an 8-7 win in 10 innings at Game 7 at Progressive Field in Cleveland. Marks the Cubs' first World Series championship in 108 years, as touched on in the film here. And Thomas Ian Nicholas celebrated the win on Twitter by posting the final shot from the film, showing Henry holding up his Cubs World Series
There
ring
you
to the
go.
camera.
Maybe the greatest World Series of all time, to be fair. It was fantastic.
Here's the thing: as somebody who grew up in Mesa, literally like down the street from the Cubs
From
spring training
yeah.
facility, and like here's the thing: it's a weird thing for it to be like for in the middle of like Arizona. All of a sudden, there's like just a center hub of Cubs fans.
Oh, not at all. We have all of the snowbirds that come out here
but
from
I mean-
Chicago.
I mean, if you
my
don't-
dad came out here from Chicago. He
But
was
that's
like,
what I'm saying. If you're not familiar with the snowbird culture,
yeah.
you'd be like, why are all these people Chicago fans of like Chicago sports, but particularly the Cubs?
Yep.
Mesa built that massive new spring training facility that we have now, where it's like people go see Cubs games, and it's a whole thing that is part of like Mesa culture. Like I grew up in it. I grew up in Mesa culture. So when they won the championship series, people here celebrated as hard as they celebrated in Chicago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like, we all the time go to Portillo's. Like, it's.
Yeah, Portillo's is there for a
We
reason
have
here.
Portillo's, we have Lou Malnati's out here, we have Spinato's Pizzeria. Like, we are one of the few outside of Chicago places that gets all of the Chicago foods because everybody's like, we want to bring that piece of Chicago to where we live half the year. So,
yeah, it's true. And so, on one level, I like as a born and bred Mets fan, does the contract every July bother me? Yes, immensely. I did my very best to ignore that entire segment. Do I cheer that the Mets beat them in the actual series for this? Yes, absolutely. But do I also recognize and appreciate the Cubs winning the World Series? Yes, absolutely. That as well.
And that's my thing, is that I feel like, obviously I'm a Yankees fan, and a lot of my family are Cardinals fans from Missouri, obviously the St. Louis. But I just think the Cubs, there is something, I mean, they're the lovable losers, right? It's hard to root against the Cubs. And I think the World Series in 2016, there's just so much, I mean, 108 years of losing and not winning the World Series is just, there's so many stories of like a father and a son at like the grandfather and the great grandfather's like grave, right? Like listen to the game together on like an old radio, right? And it's just like, and then the fact that the series itself was absolutely mental.
Oh,
and like
it
this
was
like
crazy.
comeback from 3-1 down, the crazy rain delayed game 7 going into 10 innings comeback. Like it was just, it was a phenomenal series.
Yeah. Some more trivia for you. Daniel Stern was inspired to direct this movie because it deals with kids who have to deal with fame and being controlled by adults as managers who make all of their decisions for them, having experienced that a lot on the set of the Home Alone films, after observing how his co-star Macaulay Culkin was dictated by his domineering father and wanted to direct a movie that paralleled his real-life observances.
Yeah, if you want to know, like, wow, he sure did become a massive sleazebag real fast. Just look up what happened to Macaulay Culkin and his father, and that is the inspiration of that role.
Yep. In 1993, Rowan Gartner would have been making $109,000 minimum as a rookie baseball player during that
Pretty good.
time.
That's your college fund kid right there.
There you go.
And some.
Plus his sponsorship deals with Pepsi and all that stuff.
That's true.
When Henry first goes to Wrigley Field as the pitcher, he goes to the player's entrance. When he knocks on the door to be let in, old man pokes his head out through the hole in the door, at first not letting Henry in. Henry reveals who he is, and the old man says, "Well, that's a horse of a different color." Of course, a nod to the same line being said in The Wizard of Oz in a very similar door setting with Dorothy and the gang getting into Oz. And then this one, calling out just because I'm like, okay, I appreciate that, like, they've identified the reality of the situation. The hidden ball trick that the Cubs used near the end of the movie would not have actually resulted in an out based on the MLB rules. It's because a mound visit is considered a timeout from play, which does not start up again until the pitcher has the ball while standing on the rubber on the mound. Since the first baseman had the ball after the mound meeting was done, timeout had not yet officially ended, meaning he would not have been able to tag the runner out at first. This movie, I feel like Angels in the Outfield, which, spoilers, is what we're going to be talking about next week. Like this movie, Angels in the Outfield, The Sandlot, like so many of these movies of the time, like even throw in like the Major League movies, I feel like they all blur together to me in terms of like, I remember they did this play, but I don't remember which one it was in. I feel like maybe it's in one of the Major League movies, or maybe it's even in Angels in the Outfield, where they kind of do the same play, but they do it a little bit better, or they do it like with Angels in the Outfield's the one where they throw the ball and like get everybody in on trying to find the ball, including the security guard, right? Is that what I'm thinking about? I think that's the like trick play that stands out to me, that I like. As I was watching this movie, I was like, is that going to be in this movie? No, I haven't seen that security guard, so I don't think it's going to be here. But yeah, just seeing that and like, it still comes back and it's like, okay, I appreciate that somebody's gone through and been like, well, here's the actual rules. So no, but it's still a fun scene and fun sequence. And hey, if you need to write this guy into being able to get 3 outs, there you go. You got one from a cheap hidden ball trick.
Well, also, it's important to also note that 2 things about like that end scene don't make sense. One, we know that exact injury causes a break in the bone, So him re-injuring it that same way isn't just going to magically loosen the tendons. It's going to like snap his arm.
I mean, the I wrote it, or I read it as, no, he lands on it in a way that loosens the tendons, doesn't break the bone. Like, because he's clearly not like suffering from a broken bone, a broken arm as he's doing that. I feel like he would have like said, "Hey,
for sure.
I broke my arm. I think we need to call in another pitcher for this last inning."
Also, there's also no way that ball would have been left on the field. That's the second thing.
Oh yeah.
There's no way that between the ball boys on both teams, as well as like all the other like faculty and people who make sure the field is clear of like anything.
Yeah.
There's no way like a ball, like a random baseball, is just going to be sitting there.
Of course. Yeah.
Like
it's very much just for dramatic storytelling purposes. Here's the parallel from how like we saw him running. We know exactly what's going to happen before he does. So that's the trivia I pulled here. How does this movie hold up, everybody? This is one of those fun ones where we kind of get to look back and see, like, does it hold up well? Like, I'll even throw in to start because I mentioned this to Cameron when he was watching it the other day. I feel like a lot of the music in this is just probably like public domain music and stuff, but like so much of it I know so distinctly from this movie, and like a lot of it's like the violin stuff and like the opening montage and stuff of all the fans going into Wrigley Field while the violins are kind of flaring up and doing their thing. Like I know, like this is one of those movies I could close my eyes and still visually see certain scenes tied up and synced up with the music because like I remember those sequences so vividly from when I was a kid growing up and watching this. And I say this like I enjoy this movie and I enjoy like the fun of this as somebody who does not like baseball in practice, in part because these movies, of course, always cut out all the really boring bits of baseball and just focus on the highlights. I mean,
I'm a box score guy. I can't argue that.
It's the thing. My Instagram algorithm thinks I like baseball way more than I do because it'll give me a lot of the highlights clips and stuff like that. The stuff you'll see on top plays of the game on ESPN rundowns or something like that. And it's like, oh yeah, those are really cool things to see in isolation. I would not have wanted to also sit through the 3-hour game surrounding those moments. But yeah, I enjoy them here in movies, and especially like of this era. Obviously, we're sitting in here with the Sandlot. Which, speaking of, I meant to call it out, but I believe the Sandlot, which also came out this year, way down the list compared
way
to
further
this one.
down.
This one did way better than The Sandlot, which is weird to think about because I feel like The Sandlot is much more the cult classic and the like baseball movie that stands the test of time a little bit better. But yeah, what did you guys think in terms of how it holds up? Logan, let's throw it to you first. We haven't had you on for a while.
Well, first off, the average length of a baseball game is down to about 2 hours.
Yes,
and 40
I know
minutes now.
because they've employed rules of like, hey, you have to cap out you like pitch it, like there's now shot clocks for pitches basically and stuff like that. They took the things that make basketball a little bit more fast paced and deployed that. So shout out to that, I guess.
But no, I mean, I think Rookie of the Year's, an Angel of the Outfield and the Sandlot. This is an era of, young kid baseball movies, right? I mean, I think
young kid sports movies in general, because you also like throw in stuff like Little Giants and
Mighty Ducks, right?
Mighty Ducks, yeah, obviously. Here.
I think there's something about baseball, right? I obviously love baseball. This is a sport that means a great deal to me. And I often talk about the fact that I think baseball is the most romantic sport. And when I say that, I usually then think of a scene from Moneyball that talks about how can you not be romantic about baseball, right? I just think baseball is the sport that lends itself the most to storytelling. There are these natural beats between every play. Every pitch is this moment of tension that has so much going into it. And its slightly slower paced nature instead of being a negative to me, is one that just leads itself to having this really, I think, lovely momentum and build up and tension. So again, it goes back into being the most, I think, the best suited for storytelling purpose, like a movie. I also think, baseball is a romantic sport. It's like the only sport that really cares about its records to the degree it does, and its history, and really cherishes that, right? The NFL technically was founded in 1920, but anything before the Super Bowl, they just pretend didn't exist now, right? And all of their records are sort of just, meh, who won the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I feel like we have a lot of asterisks in baseball with like when the Negro League, when that kind of stuff starts getting implemented and stuff.
Maybe,
But I mean, even then,
think,
they still have massive recognition for it today.
Sure, yeah,
Like,
I think
that's the stats lovers know everything about baseball and have incredible databases and can go nuts in terms of that stuff.
But it's also like when the great science that people still are trying to pull off, which is how do you reconcile the Negro League's records with the MLB's records, and like trying to mix and match and figure them out, and like that's a fascinating conversation to hear. As somebody who's like a data person, hearing them talk about baseball stats like that I get into that. Like I love the idea of like how do you reconcile those data sets, because it's virtually impossible. You can't, but they sure do try, and it's fun to see like the like mental magical math that they try to do to like make these things work. Like what kind of equations can we put together to make these things work? But it's true, baseball's the only sport that really does that.
And really care and has that history, right? And I think baseball is the only sport that has numbers that have meaning outside of that sport. No one knows what the career passing yardage record or career touchdown yardage record is, or the most touchdowns in a season, or passing yards in a season, or points in a season, or career points in the NBA. But if you say, 61 home runs in a season, right, you think of Roger Maris, right, and the New York Yankees, or 60 home runs in a season, and Babe Ruth, right, or 714, right, and Babe Ruth's, career home run record, right, and these are sort of like almost mythological numbers, right, and even like the 500 home run club, or the 60 home run club, or 3,000 hits, these are things that you can just say and you sort of understand with an impact that I think other sports don't have. And so I think there is this romanticism to baseball, which is also tied into two other very important things, which is baseball's old. It's really, really old. Depending on how you want to track it, the sport itself predates the Civil War. I mean, the major leagues go back to the 1860s. And so it's a sport that just has a history that no other sport does. All the other big sports in America came around World War II. The NFL is kind of the exception with 1920, but again, they don't care about that history anymore, just the Super Bowl onwards, which is the 60s. And so you just have this almost kind of ancientness, and especially in a country that compared to Europe and Asia and African cultures and nations is new, right? Baseball's been around basically for all but the first 90 years of America's existence as like an actual sport that has records to it. And
even before that, stickball predates it by how many hundreds of years?
Right. And so it is one of the few things that is like almost there from the beginning in America that is actually old. And so I think that lends something to kind of this romantic nature to it, almost like the mythological status that baseball has in our culture, which then feeds nicely into the second point of why I think baseball is the most romantic sport, which is everyone played it. Everyone, especially of so many generations up until ours, everyone played baseball. Everyone had, played Pee Wee baseball or Little League baseball. Or
I played T-ball, yeah.
I did 2 years, a year of T-ball and a year of Little League, yeah.
And if not that, they at least played with their friends and threw balls and hit it with a stick or hit it with a bat and did that kind of thing, right? Like, it is a sport that in some ways is very simplistic.
I injured myself and my next door neighbor with a metal bat
Yeah, exactly.
It hit very, very hard.
It,
when we were
it is
playing.
in some ways one of the simplest sports to play. Do you have a thing to throw? Do you have a thing to swing? Great, you have baseball, right?
Well,
And
yeah,
then you just
that's
run places. And
that's the
so,
origin of stickball. Hey, I have a stick.
Yeah.
Throw that at me, and I'm going to hit it with the stick. That's the
so-
origin of baseball.
that universal nature of baseball, right? And the fact that everyone has sort of played a little bit of baseball, either competitively or not. And if you didn't, I bet you your dad did, or I bet you your uncle did, right? And it's that kind of thing. And like it feeds into both the fact that everyone's done it as a kid, and so we all have these childhood memories that lead into The Sandlot, or lead into Angels in the Outfield, or lead into the Rookie of the Year. And then it also ties into something that Field of Dreams does nicely, which is it ties into familial history and familial lineage, right? Like these are things that we did with our dads, and that our dads did with their dad, and that their dad did with their dad, right? Like it is something that like our great 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 grandpa would have taught his great great our great great grandfather, kind of thing, right? Like it is something that is literally like 5-6 generations old of rooting for the same team, of doing the same thing. And so
It
yeah,
it
I
has
don't know
certainly
how
aligned
you
its.
can't.
Go ahead, finish your thought. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, I think it just lends itself to something that is so so rich in history and culture, right? And unlike going to an NFL game, or going to a hockey game, or going to a basketball game, going to a game in person in baseball is really great, because there are those down beats, and there are those quiet moments where you can just have conversations with your dad, right? Because if you're at an NFL game or a basketball game or hockey game, to Trevor's point, things are happening constantly. And so you're not talking to your dad, or you're not talking to your grandpa, you're not talking to your uncle or your big brother in the same way. Whereas baseball, it is in some ways, especially for older generations that maybe didn't express themselves as much, it was an actual chance to sit down with your dad or grandfather or cousins or brothers for 3 hours and just shoot the shit, basically just talk and get to know who they were. And for a lot of people, a lot of men in this country, that's how they sort of knew their male family members and made those relationships and connections. And so I think that lends an extra element of kind of rose tinted glasses and romance to sport as well. And then the sport's really great. And I think this movie does not capture all of those feelings and emotions as well as something like The Sandlot does, which I think is the best baseball movie ever made.
Speaking of, I'll slot this in. I looked it up. The Sandlot was number 50 that year,
Yeah.
with $32.4 million.
Right. And
So again, it's just that weird, like, oh, like that's the one that clearly like resonated
Right.
more, but Rookie of the Year hit at the right time. Like I think a lot of it really comes down to The Sandlot, I think released in April of that year, February or April
Sounds
of that
right.
year, versus this that hit peak
Summer.
summertime and like
yeah.
took full
Especially-
advantage of
especially in
kids
93.
out in out of school for the summer.
I also think The Sandlot's a quieter movie in some ways, right? And is sort of a more like wistful, nostalgic movie by the nature of how they do its storytelling device. But yeah, like The Sandlot and Moneyball are the two best baseball movies, and they sort of ruminate on baseball a lot. And this doesn't do that, but it still has enough moments where it's just sort of like, yeah, who doesn't want to do this as a kid? Who didn't want to have this be them, right? And, I talked
Yeah.
about, there's a great Roger Ebert quote about this movie, and I'm going to quote it now because it's fantastic, which is just, I was absolutely lousy in Little League. I was a sub for one season, screwing up every player I was involved in. I stopped out there in the middle of right field, squinting into the sun, hoping desperately that the ball would not come my way. If it did, I didn't use my glove to catch it. I used my glove for protection. I was, in fact, a lot like Henry Rowan Gardner, the 12-year-old hero of Rookie of the Year. It seemed like the other kids had always known how to play baseball, and that I would never know. When I was a kid, I think I might have liked Rookie of the Year a lot. I'm no longer a kid, and this movie is not likely to make my list of the year's best. But I can remember those miserable Little League games, and so in a modest way, I'm grateful for this film. It is pure wish fulfillment 40 years after I needed it, right? And I think that's something that this movie taps into really well. And Angels of the Outfield does a little bit too, but Angels of the Outfield is also a little bit more God is directly influencing the events. And this is much more like, yeah, like this is just like a freak thing that could happen. And who wouldn't want this as a kid when they were in the outfield because they're left-handed and they couldn't be shortstop like they wanted to be, like Derek Jeter, and so they were just stuck in the outfield.
Oh wow, this sounds like somebody, huh?
And they just wanted something like this, right? They wanted some chance, like, show that they could do this, and like every kid wants to, be a star at the sport they're playing in some way, and this movie taps into that, I think, in a really good way. So I still think it's fun. I don't think it's as good as Sandlot. We'll see how Angels in the Outfield compares, but I still think it holds up in terms of being a good, fun, wish fulfillment movie.
Yeah. How about you, Cam? Let's throw it to you for how does this one hold up?
Couple things I want to say. First off, this movie is pure wish fulfillment, 100% all the way through. Like, this is a power fantasy. This is like this is the crappy athletes like movie, and I think that's one of the reasons why this movie did better than The Sandlot. The Sandlot is for all the faux horror of urban legends surrounding Hercules in that movie. This movie is just pure wish fulfillment from top to bottom of this movie. It is wish fulfillment on every level. That being said, when it came to be like, you want to be like, oh, you were left-handed, you always want to be shortstop. I mentioned at the top of this, I'm a box score guy. I like seeing the story of the game play out over like the stats of the game. And like, that's where I find my enjoyment for baseball. I was not wanting to be the next Derek Jeter. I did not like going to my I only did T-ball because my parents said, we're not wasting money for you to do Pee-wee, or coach pitch or whatever it was, because of just like how disinterested I was. I was always shoved out in an outfield, and I was like, they bribed me with candy and soda to stay out there. My family did. I was not and the thing about it is like, yeah, I enjoyed hitting the ball, but really for me, the romanticism, the kind of like the engagement, the beauty of baseball is in the showdown. It's a Western, like it's the Western showdown.
Exactly.
It's the batter is up to bat and he's up against the catcher behind him giving signals and the pitcher out there about to throw the heat, right? And figuring that out, that dichotomy of like, okay, how is this pitch going to get thrown? Do I hit it? Do I not hit it? All of that. The pitcher, what call am I getting? Yes, nod, no, shake head. The whole communication of the battery as it exists between the catcher and the pitcher. And like that sort of thing is fascinating, and the science around it, and not just the science, but kind of like the mysticism about it, the weird things. There's nobody more not supernatural. I'm trying to think of the word here for people who believe in the supernatural, who there's like a word for it, and I'm blanking on it right now. It's somebody who believes in who's superstitious. There's nobody who's more superstitious than athletes, and there's nobody who's more superstitious among athletes than baseball players. Baseball players, there is a list a mile long of all the things that baseball players did throughout their entire career that they give credit for what made them successful. And it's all supernatural nonsense. It's as simple as I wear wet socks when I go out onto the field.
Yeah.
It's like my socks have to be like this kind. My shoes, every time I'm up to bat, I have to tap the bat on each of my cleats.
Brickma sits out this game, the final game of this one, because he goes back for his lucky sunflower seeds.
Exactly.
There's something to be said to Cameron's point too about the fact that there's nothing harder in sports than hitting a baseball, right? Like the science behind hitting a baseball is genuinely mind-boggling. You have less than a second to even from when the ball is thrown to when it comes to you. Your brain takes like 3/10 of that to register something's happening, to then swing. Like, it is such an incredible process. And in some ways, I think baseball is romantic because when the truth comes out, no one's good at it. The best hitters in the game get a hit a third of the time, right? And there's
batting 300, right?
Exactly. There's a romance in that, right? Like, no one's good at this. And so the best people are still failing way more than they succeed, right? And I think there's a level of romance to the fact that like none of us are good, right? Versus like in the NFL, these are like people like they're almost like Greek gods and like all the gear they're wearing and like slamming each other, doing these kind of crazy things. Basketball players are like the peak apex of like human athleticism, and then baseball players are just like dudes in like pajama sets with a baseball cap hitting a ball sometimes. And it's like, I don't know, like there's something very human about that, right? I think there's something very human about the fact that, you know, the greatest baseball player of all time is Babe Ruth, who's a dude who was kind of overweight, who smoked and drank a lot, but was just really good at this, right? And I think there is just something so, there's something so human about how much failure there is in baseball. And to Cameron's point, like the superstition exists because you need every little bit of help you can get in this sport. It's very, very hard. And even I'm going to steal it because I've never heard it before, Cameron, but I really love it. It's a Western, ties into, you know, what more level of like wish fulfillment is there than imagine like in your backyard imagining that there are 2 outs in the bottom of the 9th inning with the bases loaded and you're like you
got to be the hero,
like, the game-winning grand slam. Exactly, like there's a level of like you can do that in a way that like is harder to imagine that scenario in
there's no other sport that does that. There's no other sport that has those
dramatic, like all of the pressures on you, one player, in a way that is harder to replicate in other sports, and like it's so dramatic.
You can't replicate it in any other sport because no other sport can set it up that way. Like when you mentioned about storytelling, the storytelling beats of a game. When you read a box score, you can tell these beats, and when things line up, like you mentioned, like you look at the box score for that Cubs game. 7th game in the series, 10 innings, and you're looking at that box score tells a story of the flow of that game and how trepidatious it was that, like, it could have gone either way that day. Yeah. It could have gone either way, and the Cubs barely eke out a win. And it's history because of that. Otherwise, it's just another disappointment in the long list of disappointments in the history of the Cubs.
And to tie it to Rookie of the Year, which is what we're here for, like
sorry about that.
No. But like you got me and Cameron excited about baseball, Trevor. But like to tie it to Rookie of the Year, there's an element too of like even the end of this game. I think is really interesting because it does it in really silly ways, but in very silly ways. Let me be clear, but I think it does capture an element of like how dramatic baseball endings can be when there's something on the line, right? Like every baseball game is dramatic in the playoffs at the end because they're just built that way by design, in a way where like football games aren't designed that way necessarily. They can't just be whatever, we've won. But baseball, like you're going to get a chance to respond kind of thing, right? And it's theoretically possible that you could just get enough runs to win, right? Whereas in a football game, you can run out the clock. Basketball game, you can run out the clock. There is no clock in baseball. If the game takes 5 hours, it takes 5 hours if you just have a crazy inning and you just keep scoring runs, right? And so there is always the potential for a comeback to happen in baseball, and that makes it, I think, naturally exciting and intense in playoff situations like this is. And even if the scenario of him like underhand and tossing the ball and striking out a baseball player with that is unlikely and kind of silly, it is still taps into how tense it is when a player like hits what is clearly a home run that just strips foul, right? And it's like, oh God, what's going to happen, right? And how, any pitch can be a home run, any pitch can flip the whole script. And I think the ending of this movie is very good. I think it's silly, but I think it's very good, and it does tap into those elements of baseball.
Tapping it, and I'll touch on it when we talk about favorite moments. There's a line through this movie that does a great job of, funny enough, you mentioned about like fathers and grandfathers and everything. There is an established patriarchy in baseball. For sure. And I say this as somebody who has 3 sisters who all played softball, who are infinitely more talented than my brother and I. Who, like my oldest sister had a scholarship to go to ASU. ASU has like one of the most championship winning softball teams in the country. And you would never know that because there's absolutely nobody who, like, there's no system that cares about it the way that people care about baseball. That being said, this movie does an amazing job of, in a through line, kind of dismantling that patriarchal notion in a really brilliant way. And I'll get to it later, but I want to finally finish up my thoughts on Rookie of the Year in particular. This movie holds up for me and is still like a triumph of a film for me because of the the wish fulfillment, the fantasy, but also in this brilliant moment between Gary Busey and Rottengaller. I can't remember his name. It's fine.
Rowan Gardner.
Rowan Gardner.
Or Henry. Just Henry.
Just Henry. Yeah, there we go. Between Stedman and Henry, and there is a really brilliant moment where it's like it's made clear this is a game. They do it for, like I mentioned it when we do these podcasts, we do it for the love of the games. Mm-hmm. This is a game at the end of the day. Like they get paid a lot of money, but it's at the end of the day, it's a game, and at any moment it could be over. And that is kind of the theme of this movie: is like enjoy the things that are in your life in the moment you have them, because they won't last forever. Things change. The game ends eventually. It'll be like one day. It's this. It's the like the saying, like one day you're going to pick up your child for the last time.
Yeah.
One day that you're gonna, like, for baseball players, one day there's gonna be a day where you don't lace up cleats.
I mean, it's one time there was a day where you played Little League with your friends for the last time. You played baseball with your friends for the last time.
Which I think Sandlot really does really well too.
Yeah, Sandlot nails that attitude of it. But I think the bigger scope of it, especially with the glitz and glamour that they hammer home in this movie, absolutely nails it. And I think that it's I think this movie holds up because it nails those themes. It's not because of the baseball. It's not because of the romanticism. It's because it has a message and it absolutely nails it with its execution.
What are our favorite moments?
Trevor needs to give his
real
thoughts.
quick. I want to weigh in on some of the back and forth that you guys had, and this goes back to like even your stuff of like no other thing has stats the way baseball has stats. As the kid who grew up playing basketball a lot, I did absolutely make believe like I got fouled, and we're down by one. I just got to make these two foul shots and win the game. And so like I definitely did that plenty. Or like, oh, we're down by two. I got to make a foul shot, then I got to like brick the second one, but get in there for the layup and win the game for the Suns and all that stuff. I did a ton of that growing up. Oh, sure. So I refute that. And then also that's like fair. Basketball, of course, also has tons of stats and like Will Chamberlain 100-point game and those kinds of things. And I certainly can't like rattle them off because I'm not the sports guy in the way that you can, but I know people have absolutely tracked like
I think the 100-point
most
game
winningest games and stuff like that.
No,
is the big one in basketball.
Well, I think that basketball definitely has it. It's just newer.
Yeah, and like, you know, Steph Curry being like, you know, 3-point craziness and all sorts of those things, and you know, Kobe Bryant, you know, as a player and all that stuff. So like
Jordan,
I think a lot of the things have those stats. It's just a matter of like which are the stats you, because I know football also, like a lot of the things you rattle off, I'm like, oh, I guarantee there are ESPN statisticians who know all of the things
absolutely.
you mentioned.
That I guess my distinction I was making is not that someone whose job is to know it knows it, is that the larger pop culture consciousness of like, I think basketball unquestionably has the 100-point game. Pop culture knows that at large, right? Mm-hmm. NFL, I stand by, there are no stats that have permeated pop culture other than 17-0 for the Miami Dolphins that went undefeated, right? Like that's a number that everyone knows, right? That pop culture.
Patriots number of championships, I guess, under the Brady era.
But how many Patriots have they won? No, they won 6, right? And so like that hasn't penetrated, right? And like I think
you think they won 8 by the way they talk about it.
And then like basketball to me is more of a, because I love basketball, but basketball to me is more of a culture within its own, right? And it's the culture of the athletes, and the athletes are almost sort of bigger in their own right.
Yeah, I think I will say to a lot of the other conversation, the idea that like the cinematic nature of baseball being one person at bat can turn the tides of a game is certainly more dramatic than a lot of these other things that are much more team, and the team is all doing the thing at the same time kind of focus. Like the reason like I get a lot of like baseball clips in my algorithms is because I love the moments where it is, this astounding triple play that like the team got together that is like 1 in a million kind of thing that happens. Like you don't see those all the time. You don't see those every game. So like it does make them a little bit more special, a little bit more magical and entertaining when they happen. But so as the person who very disconnected from baseball and never really did the like, bottom of the ninth, blah blah blah, kind of fantasy, but did do the basketball fantasy. I just wanted to throw that out there.
That's fair.
Sure. Basketball fantasy is fair.
In particular, my front yard with our Shaq branded basketball hoop, did that all the time, and it was constantly oh, I failed miserably. I was absolutely a Henry, and oh, he's doing it. He gets the layup and he misses. Oh, but there's magically 2 more seconds on the clock. He gets another. Oh, he misses again. No. Yeah. And the realism would just be, oh, and Trevor blows it for the Suns every time.
Well, if it makes you feel better, the Suns blew it enough on their own.
Absolutely,
all the time.
yeah.
I will say to your point, the basketball ones are fun because you can do stuff like that, whereas baseball, it's a lot harder to be like, all right, it's bottom of the ninth, 2 strikes, and I swing, and you miss, and it's like, well, that didn't go according to plan. It's just kind of, that screwed up.
Yep. Even there, it's, I mean, because I guess part of it is, how do you do it? Because even in baseball, it's, okay, you've got to have somebody throwing the pitch to you to do that little fantasy moment, or are you just you're throwing it up in the air and swinging?
Which definitely would lead you to be missing most of those hits. Anyway.
Sure, yeah,
I guarantee it.
With that 1 second reaction time.
Yeah.
Okay, it's up in the air, and I've got to get the grip in, and oh, it's down. It's already on the ground. Oh no. Or do it at batting cages, I guess, is another option where you're fantasizing at the batting cage. Sure, but yeah, I just this absolutely is wish fulfillment. And to my broader thoughts on the movie, I certainly had forgotten just how bad Henry is in his little league stuff.
Oh, he's garbage.
He oh, they got to put me in because the other guy's got asthma, and then we see the guy with asthma in there, and he's warming the bench kind of moment. And then they do put him in there, and he biffs it and gets the hat and throws the ball over the fence and gives them a home run. It's like, how are you that bad? But he's still so in love with it. And it was the moment that stood out to me in this movie, as a movie I've watched many, many times, but I had forgotten how this was going to play out, is the moment where he's like, okay, yeah, I'm not great in the outfield. Okay, maybe I could be a pitcher, or the mom saying maybe you could be a pitcher. And he goes down, he's putting stuff in the laundry, and he goes to throw the soap in the laundry. I fully thought, given what we've seen of this character, that he was going to biff it, and we were just going to hear it clang off the metal or something like that. But no, he gets it in. So he
has skill.
He can have a win here and there, but even when he is first doing the pitching, I forgot how long it is until we get to Cliff being like, and Henry Rowengarter throws his first strike. It's 2 games later, basically, or whatever, before it finally happens. We see him bean so many people, which would have sucked.
Yeah.
And so, that. There's also the whole, the unrealistic bit of realistically, we would have had a few warm-up pitches, and it's he's not going to be throwing to the catcher for a strike cold. I've been to enough baseball games and spring training games to know that there'd be a little bit of something between.
Also, he'd probably go.
Plus, there would have been warm up time in the pitching box and stuff like that.
Probably would go to the minor leagues first too, and not directly to the majors as a 13-year-old kid. There's also that element too, right? Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I mean, the movie at least justifies that in the we need to sell out every game for the rest of the season, or we're gonna have to give up the franchise. Okay, well, here's the attraction we're going to use to sell out.
Yeah.
And the audience immediately buys into the attraction and the excitement of this 12-year-old kid who can throw a 100-mile-an-hour fastball. There is absolutely a selling point. I don't think it immediately turns around Cub sales overnight from what we see to sell out crowds the rest of the season. I think that's a little bit of extra wish fulfillment for Cubs fans.
Sure.
But yeah, this movie absolutely is, and so many of the movies of this era, and why we get so many fun kids sports movies are kids wish fulfillment. Yeah, I think even the other movies we've talked about in the 90s month, Camp Nowhere. Kids getting to have a summer completely free of their parents and do what they want to do and not do the camp that their parents want them to do. Absolute wish fulfillment. Heavyweights, kids getting to take over a tyrannical camp leader and do, again, the same kind of thing. Eat whatever they want to eat at fat camp. Absolute wish fulfillment. So yeah, here we get more wish fulfillment with this kid getting a magical super arm, and that lets him, play for his favorite team. Going into kind of segueing into favorite moments. I love the moments in this movie that do focus on it being about play. And Henry gets his cast off. His mom gives him and his friends like the ticket to the Cubs games, and they freak out and they're so excited. And I love that they're doing it while they're going down the wrong side of the escalator, because I hadn't caught it before, or at least I certainly didn't remember it. But like, I love there's a moment later when the Cubs are doing well that all the adult players are excitedly running down the wrong side of the escalator, and so like that infectious joy that translates from the kids to the adults. We get that great scene of the kids playing like catch and like imaginary catch and imaginary baseball out on the field with Henry, and we see the adult Cubs players come in and be really affected and really moved by this. I almost expected them to like join in. I feel like that's a moment I've seen in a sports movie that they don't, but like you still see them enjoy, and like it really like warms their heart to this kid who's bringing this like magic back to the game. Obviously, we see him kind of spark a light in Gary Busey's character, and so there is like this fun focus on play, and even in small moments when we see Barry Bonds strike out, he still gives like a smile to the kid of like, you got me, like I'm impressed. Yep. I appreciate that kind of thing, and so I really like enjoy a lot of those beats and those elements of this movie. But yeah, there's also the like, oh yeah, I remember the wannabe stepdad being kind of like something's gonna be. I did not remember him immediately going sleaze bag and being just like immediately going into the greasy slicked back hair and smoking the cigar, and I'm just immediately. But yeah, especially in the context of Macaulay Culkin dad kind of thing, it's like, oh yeah, no, that is absolutely a pointed takedown on that kind of overbearing parent, and especially that he's not the parent. He's lucked into it 3 weeks into this relationship and immediately makes it all about him.
That he's super overcommitting to.
Yeah. Loving that. I felt like there was a beat that I was expecting of like, well, you signed the contract. I got him to sign the contract, so he's going to the Yankees. That just kind of gets dropped. But so be it. But yeah, I like overall a very fun movie. It's weird seeing how young Thomas Ian Nicholas is in this, and like seeing him completely missing that tooth for the entirety of the movie kind of thing, and
missing
just,
one of his 12-year-old molars,
and the amount of like voice breaks and cracks that he has, and like him doing the full like Ray Charles singing the Pepsi stuff and just being like, oh, he went all for it in a way that you feel like they kind of didn't really need him or want him to do, but he's just doing it. And it's like, that's a brave, 13, 14-year-old kid doing this role. And so shout out to him and just fully committing and fully going out there.
When the director asked the 12-year-old to be sexier?
Yeah, God, yeah, that's wild.
He's like, when can I leave?
Yeah.
It's like so good.
And all of the, like, he's bad at baseball, even down to the just, like, over the top, throw him the cheese, throw him the hot, stinky Limburger, like, pitcher's got a big butt, like, the just most basic juvenile of, like, trash talk, I guess. It's just like, wow, yeah, no, this is definitely, but it's I remember that absolutely coming into my lexicon growing up, like, yeah, pitcher's got a big butt absolutely was screamed at the school PE games and stuff for the rest of adolescence and stuff. So definitely like feeling a lot of those memories and thoughts come back. And then also just friggin' wild that Gary Busey's in this movie and fully gets like the romantic subplot with the mom and is gonna turn into Henry's stepdad. We see him coaching the little league team at the end in his retirement years and stuff. It's just like, oh god, yeah, like Cameron watching this and being like, "Holy shit, it's Gary Busey!" kind of.
I did say that. I forgot he was in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did too. I did too, to be fair.
And I was like, "Who's the guy with the?" Oh my god, it's Gary Busey! Like, holy crap!
Yeah, because it's
Shout
in
out
the
to-
same vein of like there are so many of these movies that, you know, the ones that we're going to talk about, the ones that we don't talk about, but yeah, it's like it's the oh yeah, that's right. Dennis Leary was the character in Sandlot. It's Tony Danza's going to be in Angels in the
And
Outfield.
This is what I was going to say.
It's
is that
Charlie
shout out
Sheen
to-
in Major League. It's like there's always like that character where it's like, oh god, yeah, you're in this.
The thing about it, you don't notice it's Gary Busey because his mustache is covering like his teeth.
No, I immediately noticed it was Gary Busey.
Oh, I did. Like, I had a hot second where I was like, "Who's that guy?" And then he opened his mouth under the in his teeth. You could see his teeth under the mustache. I was like, "Holy shit, it's Gary Busey." Those
Shout out to
big
Gary Busey
buckaroos.
getting the happy ending that Tony Danza won't get next week.
Sure.
Little spoiler
I'm trying
for
like
Angels in the Outfield.
if it's not in the, is it in the, what's like, where is, because there was a moment I was thinking about in this movie that didn't happen, and I'm like, oh, that's right, it's got to be in one of these other movies. Which is the one where it's like, hey, if you make this play, you can date my mom. Oh, okay, you can date my mom anyway. Is that the next movie? Is that with Tony Danza?
I don't recall.
It's definitely not Angels in
It's
the
not.
Outfield.
Yeah, it's
because
definitely not. Considering Agent.
he doesn't have kids. He doesn't have parents in that movie.
Yeah, the whole point is that he's of an abandoned child. So
Yeah.
Oh, I don't remember that from Joseph Gordon-Levitt's
Yeah.
character in that one. All right,
Yeah.
we'll see that.
there's a reason why he's praying to God for the Angels to win. Yeah, it's the whole plot of that movie.
It's clearly been a long time since I watched that
Yeah.
one.
I don't
And
like
yeah,
watching that movie because it's really fucking sad.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
that's
movie's
definitely a trying to remember. What sports movie, what baseball movie am I thinking of then?
Yeah,
Where
Angel
but I
in the
know that
Outfield,
scene
despite
you're
having
talking about.
angels, is a very sad movie.
yeah,
Yeah, it's got a real. I mean, it's got like
Oh,
a happy ending, but it's,
it's
also
Mighty
a sad
Ducks.
ending.
Yeah, Mighty Ducks.
It's
if
Mighty
you-
Ducks.
yeah.
It's Charlie and Mighty Ducks
Charlie,
saying
yeah,
like
you're
if I make this or if we make this play, you can date my mom. Oh, that's okay. You can date my mom. Yeah, that's absolutely where it is. But yeah, so it's all of these. Another great wish fulfillment thing. Not only does this kid, like these kids win they're the underdogs, they win the championship. The next year they're Team USA.
USA.
Yeah.
And the wildness there. So, yeah. Cam, let's throw it back to you for some of your favorite moments in this one.
Yeah, for me, I think my biggest favorite moment is the through plot line of the fact that every time she mentions his dad loving baseball, she's actually talking about herself.
Yeah.
And to the point where he pulls this like the repair tape off of the mitt, and he sees his mom's name there.
Yeah.
And he tells her, he goes, "I was in second grade when I found out my dad like left us. Like, I'm not surprised. Like, it's okay. I know my dad you know who my father is, but he's also a loser who up and left. Like, it's never been about that. Like, I know that." And like you can tell the fact that she is like fangirling over Stedman when they're introduced. And the fact like they have like that beautiful like that very nice like very simple romance. Is like this very awesome, like once again, wish fulfillment. You want your favorite player to date a single mom. Like,
Sure.
once again, like wish fulfillment. You want him to be your stepdad. Like,
Which
yes.
is why I kept expecting or waiting for that moment in here of like, hey Chet, like strike this guy out and you can date my mom, and then it just didn't come.
Yeah, that
And I was
doesn't
like,
happen,
What movie am I thinking of?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
bugging me all week.
Yeah, that's the whole thing about it is like you do have this like really cool kind of like once again we talk about that dismantling that patriarchy a little bit here, where you have his mom being the through line for baseball for him. His mom loves baseball. It's his mom's old mitt. It's his mom who is getting him Cubs tickets for getting his cast off. It's his like everything about this is really it's about a boy and his mom and their love of baseball and like the shared love of baseball between the two of them. And the fact that it's all turned up to 11 with this crazy arm happening while at the same time he's learning the lessons of like what it means to be a kid.
Right.
Like it's its own thing that includes all of that and it encompasses that. Shout out to them fixing up a boat and like picking up hotties on the beach.
Yeah, that absolutely just a weird little subplot of like, this is the thing we're doing because this is what kids did.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. We totally went out and just like stole motor parts and turned them into a boat.
Yep. To pick up girls. Also, shout out to like his friend who's like, he goes, I don't know what we have in common. I'm just going to talk to her. And then it working out for him.
Yeah.
And it's like, there you go. That confidence and that like willing to go for it. The engine that's smoking so terribly, you can barely see them on that boat.
The poor two kids in the back.
Yeah. No, it's just everybody ends up with their girl. Everybody, like, he doesn't have to go back and continue playing it. He had that 1 year. He won a World Series. He has a ring.
Yeah.
It's that perfect wish fulfillment that I think that makes this such a feel good movie.
I had forgotten about the like holding the ring at the camera to show that they win the World because it's very specifically not the World Series.
No, it is the pennant.
It's the pennant that they win in the game, and so it was one of those things of like, oh, they know better than to like tease the Cubs with actually winning the World Series
that's not happening.
on camera.
In the 90s?
Yeah.
No, that wasn't happening at all. The fact that they had like the Mets losing to them was like a fantasy. Mm-hmm. The Mets losing to the Cubs for the pennant in the 90s was a fantasy to them.
Yeah.
So there you go. There's that. Like it's its own thing with that, man. Also shout out to like the Mets being the bad guys in this movie. Normally it's the Yankees who are the bad guys in all the baseball movies, but this time it's the Mets. My guys.
The one big burly specific Met who
Yeah.
I do. It's another one of those things like I like that like he's the guy who got the first hit off of Henry right off the bat.
And then that culmination
it kind of like comes full circle too at the end. Yeah.
Yep.
Also shout out. It was in the. It's a another thing in the trivia, but it's basically like the floater is like known as the nothing pitch, I think, if I read that correctly somewhere, because whoever did it called it a nothing pitch, and in the dialogue back and forth between Henry and the guy, he's like, "You got nothing, kid," and then he's like, "What are you smiling about?" And Henry says, "Nothing," all a nod to that particular pitch.
There you go.
So yeah. Logan, how about you? What are some of your favorite moments from the film that we haven't already discussed or covered?
Again, the manager getting his last name wrong is never not hilarious to me.
Saving that for you.
I love that when that happens in any movie or TV show, they just like continuously not get it right, and then at the very end, it's like, I got you. I got the right name here.
By the way, quick. I don't know if you're gonna bring it up, but the segue when they say, who's running this team? And it shoots over to the cuts to the owner, and he's excited about getting the ring and the Cracker Jacks. Mm-hmm. Peak cinema.
Also, maybe a weird shout out, but one that I think bears repeating. Shout out to them actually having actual baseball teams in this. This is an era where they were just getting like this engine outfield. They just got actual teams. Little Giants, they were actual like football teams they were able to like name. And by the time we got to like the 2000s, they had to be like, shout out to the Houston, Skyhawks and the Baltimore, Warrior Eagles are playing each other. It's like couldn't use they didn't get the license agreements anymore, and it's like that's not as much fun. So
yeah,
shout to
all the managers
the
banded together and wanted more money for the licensing rights.
Yeah, yep. So that's why like Any Given Sunday, the Billy Bob Thornton NFL movie that has fake NFL teams is not as much fun as actual stuff like this. I think we haven't really talked about him in it. Daniel Stern's character is really odd in this. I had forgotten, honestly, that he was in this movie. Again, to your point, you've kind of mentioned a couple of times. I knew he was in one of these movies.
Yeah.
And then I saw him and was like, oh, right. I don't know how this is going to go. And then I watched the movie and was like, not great, I think. He's, to pull a classic Logan and Trevorism here, he's in a whole other movie. He does not know what movie he's in right now.
Which is very weird because he's the one directing the movie.
Which is why it works.
He's in a whole other element. Like he's cranked up to 11 in every single scene.
Well, you know why
we just need like a 5. Yeah. Like he's full cylinders.
His introduction is literally the manager said, I injured him so severely when we started playing baseball that I've basically had to keep him with me our entire careers.
Yeah, it's really weird. All this stuff with him.
He has massive brain injury. I've had to support him over the years.
He's almost in like a Charlie Chaplin silent film comedy, with how much he's overacting in this thing. And so he's not my favorite part of the movie. And what is my favorite part of the movie, I think the kids are actually pretty
kids
good
are
in
so
this
good.
thing. Like, like it's always such a risk coming back to these movies when you're not a child anymore. It's like sometimes the kids are kids and aren't great actors, but like I think they all do really well. Like I think Henry and his friends in particular, like that trio is really well. They feel very authentic, but not like hokey. They feel like kids, but they're still written like actual people. Like I think those three characters in particular carry a lot of the emotional beats, like Trevor has talked about. And they really work a lot for me. And again, when we compare this next week to Angel in the Outfield, I would be curious to see how Joseph Gordon-Levitt and his little brother play off in that movie. And from what I remember, JGL is pretty good, and his kid brother is not so good.
Is a
And
very
so-
young actor, yeah.
And so we'll see if my recollection is correct. But the kids here are really good. I really like them a lot. I like Gary Busey.
Not something we get to say very often.
I was going to say, don't cut that out, but I enjoy him in this movie. I think, he is playing just like a normal person, which is rare for him. And I think he gets a lot of fun moments. I like his whole conversation with Henry on the mound, where he's like, what the hell did I just say? And then it cuts to Henry being like, what did he just say even? And I thought that whole exchange, the have and the have not thing was really fun. And I think, Cameron sort of touched on this a lot already, which is that like the movie's just fun. Like it's just a fun movie. And like, it's not as good as The Sandlot. I'm very curious to compare it to Angels in the Outfield. It's certainly happier. And in some ways, out of the trilogy of early 90s baseball kid movies of Sandlot, this, and Angels in the Outfield, this is unambiguously the happiest, most joyful one of all three of them.
Yeah.
It ends with the Cubs winning the World Series after a 13-year-old pitched them to the pennant. And it's like, that's just like the plot. And like, there's not really ever too many. The most dramatic bad thing that happens is Henry hurts his arm back to being normal again, and then has to pitch and still wins the game. And so, yeah, like it is just a joyful, fun summer movie. And I don't know, I don't think it's a movie that you can really be too upset watching. I enjoy it still. I had a soft spot for it as a kid, where I liked it a lot and thought about it a lot. And I think in some ways it is not the best out of those three 90 kid movie baseball films, but I think Henry might be the best main character that any of the three have.
That's fair.
Because the thing about The Sandlot is demonstrably and definitively a better movie than this is, but I don't know if it's because of the main character himself, who is in some ways kind of just the most basic of all of the cast.
Well, it's an ensemble cast. The Sandlot's a massive ensemble
Right.
cast. It's not about any particular child. The center child is because he's our narrator.
Right,
That's the
but when you
only
think of
reason he's
Sandlot-
the center character. Otherwise, it's just the vast majority of these like wild
Right.
characters.
I feel like you get drawn towards the other cast of characters really. Obviously, there's so many characters in that who are like iconic, right? And then in Angels in the Outfield, Joseph Gordon-Levitt is a child and does the best he can. But from what I remember, it's not spectacular. He's okay, and his younger brother's not.
Yeah.
And it's got Danny Glover and Tony Danza who are doing a lot of the heavy lifting there, right?
Yeah, and
So-
Christopher Lloyd as
Yeah.
the angel.
Right. Versus like here, like Henry is a legitimate, like good main character in his own right who carries a lot of the thing and has a lot of like good beats and moments throughout, right?
It's because he's able to express that earnestness that a kid that age should have who loves the sport.
Yeah.
To the point where Trevor pointed out, he's doing the Ray Charles bit singing with his broken ass, busted 13-year-old in puberty voice.
I also just think he's not dominated by the adults or he's not dominated by more interest in kids, right? Like he's just is the focus here in a way that the other two leads in other films either aren't or they're kind of consumed by Christopher Lloyd, Tony Danza, and Danny Glover, which is fair. You're not going to hold your own against that probably. So I like it a lot, as we kind of segue into like report card.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious to see all of our rankings, but I enjoy it.
One last thing I'll throw out there, like back on, we were talking about Daniel Stern's character, and yeah, the fact that he's in a wildly different like movie.
Yeah.
I dug into it. It's like he is the Carl Weathers, like we can make a soup out of that meme 30 years before that's a meme, 20 years before that's a meme, before that's a character.
We can make a
that's
bit out of this. We can make a joke out of this.
It's not we can make a joke. It's the whole like subplot where he's like, there's free food everywhere. You gotta take it. You gotta hoard it. You gotta.
Oh,
You
yeah.
gotta take that food, and there you got it for breakfast in the morning.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Shout at him, be like, "Excuse us, ladies."
Yeah. I said,
Excuse us, ladies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pinball.
But yeah, the bit of the you alluded to earlier with like the odd bellhop moment where like, oh, it seems like your door's acting up kind of thing, and then we see him just get stuck in between two doors, and that like shot, that overhead shot of him like, a little help, oh no, just being like, yep, this is like, it is just fascinating of like, okay, you just like, they wanted you to direct, but then they also wanted you to play this like bit role in it because you're so, known for the physical comedy of the Home Alone movies. So let's find a spot for you to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, like we're gonna just do incredibly contrived moments to give you that. Like it's like I always remember staying in hotels where you had that weird connecting door to another room. And this idea that it's like, oh, that there's enough space in there that a person could fit between the two doors is like, no, like
not my fat ass, that's for sure.
No, they couldn't. They're like, you did not make the walls like many people know you did not make the walls in your hotel that thick to be able to fit a person in there. So, but yeah, that's a weird little bit. The fact that like just nobody's in there in their locker room during the game to find him at all, and he's just stuck. He's just locked in there.
There wouldn't be some support staff or anybody running back to grab things. No.
But yet he knows exactly what's going on because he's reacting to the excitement, just like everybody else. Kind of stuff. It's like just weird. It's a weird thing, which feels like, all right, I got to put all my focus on shooting this movie and directing this movie, and then I'll do some pickup scenes where I'm doing solo physical things by myself, and I can just, get some of the crew here, say action, and go get in place and do the thing.
That's what he does.
Yeah. But yeah, like it's for it being like his like directorial debut film wise kind of thing. It's like it holds up fine. It's a fun. They shoot the baseball moments well. It is something I was thinking about as I was putting the doc together. It's like even the idea of like, okay, we're seeing so much pitching and so much catcher. It's like, okay, like, is that a real catcher that's there, or is it an actor who's like having to do the catching and stuff like that? The reality of choreographing the baseball sequences, and they got to strike out, and they got to strike out in a believable way that is 100-mile-an-hour fastball. Are we actually seeing them, get pitched a 100-mile-an-hour fastball, or is it CG or whatever? Like, what are we seeing in a lot of these sequences? But they make it work, and it's fairly believable. Apart from the awkward, like the choreography routine that Henry has for his pitch, doesn't lean into the like action we need to see him of like the tightened tendons,
arm snap.
But also at the same time, shout out to and I had forgotten that this is absolutely where it came from. Shout out to the poor doctor being slapped and the whole funky butt lover. Did he say funky butt lover?
Which is also something that I said as a kid.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like that was absolutely picked up by me and my friends and
not allowed to. Wasn't allowed to say the word butt as a kid.
Sure.
Oh.
Yeah. But yeah, just that being like, oh, he clearly wants to say something very different. But yeah. And then shout out to the little romance that he gets with the girl who would go on to be the cat in Mighty Ducks. It's definitely one of those like, oh, I remember having a crush on her between this movie and those next pair. Cute girl and the interested in the sports stuff. And like I like that she's interested in, and we see that she's clearly interested in him, even when he's crappy, like well before he's famous. It's not about
Yeah,
that.
it is.
There's no element of this being like, oh, now that you're like playing for the Cubs, I'm interested in dating you. We see her smiling and flirting with him
Oh,
Right.
Super
before
real.
any of that in a fun way.
The only reason he goes out to even catch the ball to do that is because he wants to impress her.
Yeah.
And so like that's a whole other subplot about it, that it's like this girl they've been crushing each other super hard, but like you said, what do I even talk to her about? Because they're at that point they're 11. Like it's not even that. Yeah, no, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Any final favorite moments before we dive into the report card?
I think
Let's
we're good for the
report
report
it,
card.
man.
All right, yeah. Diving into the report card, where we grade Rookie of the Year from A+ to F. Cameron, let's throw it to you first. What do you want to give Rookie of the Year?
It's getting a solid A from me.
Oh wow. Okay.
The nostalgia's been strong in these 90s movies.
For me, yes. I will say for me, yes. Because also I'm looking at this as a family film. But I think the biggest thing that gets it an A rank for me and not like a B+ or a A- is it's the shots of Wrigley Field. And it's the shots of the crowd coming in. It's the shots of like the old 80s, 90s Wrigley Field. Like this, like not like before they had like quote unquote modernized baseball stadiums. Like this is an old school baseball field. And you feel that, and you see that, and
Right. I mean, Wrigley Field still is obviously.
it's still like it's a legendary field.
Yeah.
And there's something about the way that shot. It's like you mentioned those violin scene, like the orchestral moments of people going in.
Yeah,
like,
the montage of the fans showing up, but also like the landscapers like painting the lines
Yeah.
and doing that stuff,
There-
like kind of scraping the dirt or raking the dirt, pulling the tarp off the lawn, kind of all that stuff.
There is like even to the scene where it's like, oh, it's a rained out game. They show you the raining out of it and like the tarp over the dirt and everything. Like there's something about this movie that is like a deep love of Cubs and Cubs culture and Wrigley Field
Yeah.
that to me strikes me, even as somebody who's not like a deep, like has no connection to Wrigley Field. There's a reverence for that field that feels right, that makes that movie work for me in a way.
To the to your point earlier about like the superstition of baseball and stuff, it's the ritual. It's
Yes.
like the ritual of the fans attending, the ritual of the guy putting together the programs and like straightening them out, and the hot dog slingers. Also, shout out, I didn't catch it until you were rewatching it a couple days after I had.
He tells him, you messed this up, I'm going to make
this up. I'm going to make you sell hot dogs in the nosebleeds, and then obviously that's where he
That's-
ends
yep.
up selling
end.
hot dogs in the nosebleeds. So yeah, shout out to the ritual of the baseball
Yeah.
montages and sequences that we get. So an A from Cameron. What do you want to give this, Logan?
I was gonna give it a C plus. I'll bump it to a B. A B minus.
Now, Logan, I think Logan has forgotten that we sometimes grade on a curve on this podcast. We grade on the curve of like cheesy '90s nostalgia movie. Yeah.
I mean, I think even within that, it's not as good as The Sandlot. It's not as good as The Mighty Ducks, right? It's not as good as. I mean, I like Little Giants a lot. I mean, like it is my, out of the trilogy of this, Sandlot and Angels in the Outfield. I like this probably comparatively to Angels in the Outfield. Because Angels in the Outfield is probably a better movie, even if it's a worse main character. It's just way sadder, right? It's sort of, do you want a happy one or a sad one? But I'd probably give it a B minus. I mean, I think Cameron's point is totally apt in terms of like how the level of detail it gives to the Cubs routine is really nice. And just baseball in general, the tiny baseball touches that I think this spends more time with than other movies of this ilk.
Also, you're never gonna get me to hate on like a 90-minute, 100-minute runtime. Like,
Yeah, I think it's a
Oh,
fun.
I'm sure we sometimes can.
I think it's a fun, happy movie, and I think it is anchored by really good performances by the kids. And I think, yeah, like I don't understand what's wrong with a nice B movie with a happy ending that never takes it. You know what it is? Like it knows the kind of movie it is, and really enjoys that about itself. I think like I feel like it really enjoys what it is and has a lot of fun with it, and it takes itself the right amount of seriousness, which is very little. And I think, I think Trevor is more surprised than I am that this did quite a bit better than The Sandlot. But like in some ways, it's a way easier movie to get into. Like the Bear of Entry is very simple for this one, and the journey you're on is way simpler. And so yeah, like I think it's a B minus. Again, that is, I still enjoy this movie quite a bit. It's still a good movie. I think there are better kid, sports movies from the early 90s, but this is definitely on the better end of them as well, because there are also some really bad ones out there as well.
I will say, just to kind of add an addendum to mine as well, is a theme and a factor that will always get like a higher rating for me is earnestness. Earnestness is something that I value in people.
I like that.
And the fact that this is an earnest movie, it knows what it is, it's going for it, it nails it for me. That execution of that earnestness will give it that bump up for me every day, anytime. So
I'm probably a bit in between the two of you. I'm just going to give it a flat B. Shout out to, we didn't talk about him a ton, but shout out to John Candy, who is like quintessentially Chicago. So him being the voice of like the Chicago fan, the diehard who is there, the announcer, and like it's another thing that like clearly like he's brought into the movie late, so there's no scenes with him interacting with really any of the other cast. It's just they brought him in for a couple days of shooting a whole bunch of scenes where he's like doing all these reaction things. But like his range of going from like, all right, what is this joke that we're doing, to the excitement and the joy of supporting Henry and the Cubs winning the pennant and all that stuff. A great fun late career thing for him. In the same era that was going to have him do like Cool Runnings shortly after this, may have been shot kind of in the same sort of time frame around Cool Runnings. So we talked about in last week's episode for Heavyweights that like he's basically at the end of his career, because he unfortunately would pass away not too long after these movies and stuff. So seeing him pop up is always a delight. Even if it's not like, because he's not doing an overly comedic character. He has like a couple little beats with Ernie. There's like weird tech stuff going on. He has the like, you're on the air, oh, we're on the air kind of like discovery moment, but like he's mostly just kind of adding a little bit of color commentary to the film, and we get a few extra moments of this very brief runtime film that are just kind of like John Candy announcer moments. So shout out to that. But a B overall for me. There is absolutely like a lot of fun nostalgia to this, and it's absolutely it's absolutely grading on the like 90s nostalgia curve. Right. Whereas like realistically, like especially given that I don't really care about baseball, this is probably like a D or a D plus. But like no, there is a heart and an earnestness to it that does kind of elevate it a little bit above a lesser version of this kind of movie. So, shout out to that. Extra credit, other suggestions if you like this. That Disney Plus is going to recommend The Mighty Ducks, which if you like that, you go watch episode 67 of that D Plus show. The Sandlot, episode 213 of that D Plus show. The Rookie, which we've not done a that D Plus show.
Also pretty good.
It's all right.
These are the two movies I also get conflated a lot with, so there's some scenes that I didn't see in them.
The Rookie being the Dennis Quaid old guy who's can suddenly throw better than he did when his youth kind of.
Oh, sorry, The Rookie. I'm thinking of a different one. Sorry, never mind, different thing.
We've done it again.
Yeah, I was going to say that's my man of the house.
There's our man of the house confusion. Yeah. Cool Runnings, episode 112 of that D Plus show. Blank
Also
Check. Episode 74 of that D Plus show.
Problematic.
It wasn't. I don't call it being problematic.
The age gap.
Oh yeah, right. No, absolutely. The weird age. The weird.
Not man of the house problematic. Different problematic.
Like not problematic until this weird out of age kiss from the main character at the end. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Absolutely a good call. Good shot there.
I think Frank's reaction, that's a grown woman. It's one of my favorites.
First kid
Love
out
First
there
Kid.
with Sinbad. Heavyweights,
First Kid.
our last episode 228, and then Kazam with Shaq out there for the
First Kid
suggestions.
is so good, actually. I haven't thought about First Kid in a minute.
With Sinbad, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. I love it as a kid.
Extracurriculars. Anybody watching anything else on Disney Plus? I think we're probably just in full blown like watching the '90s movies that we're doing. Have you been watching anything on Disney Plus there, Logan? We haven't had you on for a while. Did you watch any of the new Doctor Who stuff? Did you watch any of the Acolyte? I know it was a busy summer for you with your wedding, but so you may not have gotten around to any of it. But
No.
Nope.
No.
All right.
I'm trying to think of what we even watched on streaming. We're starting the new season of. We're about halfway through season 19 of Hell's Kitchen, as me and Trevia do our Hell's
Classic.
Kitchen watch.
So good.
Love Hell's Kitchen, but otherwise, I don't believe we've really watched anything else other than that.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for this week's episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you, everybody, for joining me for this one for Rookie of the Year. You can follow Cameron at Rev Cabot, 2 B's and 2 T's. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Cam?
Yeah, want to give a shout out to our most recent That Nerdy Site show, where you and I kind of went over what we've been doing since we had to skip a week because of spoiler casting Deadpool and Wolverine. So I talked about Mecha Break. You talked about your experience with Metal Gear Solid, which was a fun thing for me. Getting to like hear from you, 20, 30 years later after that game came out.
Did you play Metal Gear Solid for the first time?
So I've been revisiting Metal Gear Solid 5, but also I've played the first half of the first Metal Gear Solid for the first time.
What'd you play it on?
I'm playing it on PS4. They did a collection, volume 1 of a collection last year that was Metal Gear 1, 2, and Snake Eater, as well as like if you really want. Like,
I've
the
never
NES
played them
ones.
either.
Yeah. So I've played through about the first half of the first Metal Gear, but I've mostly been focusing on Metal Gear Solid 5 and gameplay from.
Don't propose
9
something
years
you
ago.
don't have the time to take up, Logan.
I might have the time. Well, I'll talk to you after this.
I don't have the time to do streams or let's play videos. So, but yeah, we can certainly talk. You follow Logan at Lefty Logie, Loggy. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Logan?
Shout out to That D Plus show. They're going through all the 90 movies right now. You might have seen them talk about
Rookie
The
of the Year.
Sandlot, Rookie of the Year now in this one. And then next week, we'll talk about Angels in the Outfield and then Mrs. Doubtfire. I'll for sure talk about Mrs. Doubtfire and maybe Angels in the Outfield.
There you go. You follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. I will shout out Cameron's streams over on youtube.com/thatnerdysite. Now that he's getting some substitute teaching work, they might be a little bit more infrequent, but go check those out if you are so inclined. As Logan said, next week we'll be doing Angels in the Outfield, which in our timeline is going to be a couple weeks from now because we're pre-recording this because I'm going to be off in DC when this is all going live. So we couldn't do it kind of in the normal flow of the schedule. But stay tuned. We did 2 camp movies. We're doing 2 baseball movies. And then we will wrap up August with Mrs. Doubtfire as just one of the absolute best of the 90s movies out there.
Yes.
So
Yes.
absolutely. Check out all that stuff. You follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please remember to like, rate, review, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, and class dismissed.